Hi, Logic students. This is our first video, and I just wanted to comment on a few of the most important concepts in our course. Let's start with the idea of statements. I think it's easy to understand what a statement is. A statement is basically a unit of language that can be true or false. So, for example, Barack Obama is the current US president. This is a statement. It corresponds to the definition, a unit of language that can be true or false. This is also a statement. It's a false statement, but it's still a statement in the sense defined, a unit of language that can be true or false. In this case, it is false. What is not a statement is, for example, a question or a command or a wish. These are all units of language that are meaningful, but they don't say something that can be true or false. Their purpose is different. A question is a request for information. A command is a prompt that is designed to get somebody to do something. And a wish is an expression of benevolence towards another person, but it doesn't necessarily say anything that can be true or false. Now, statements can be arranged in sets. So you can take a statement, and then put another one with it. What you have here, and you can add more. This is a set of statements. These are three statements together. They're not particularly related to each other. I suppose these are three things that you could say in conversation, but not necessarily in the same conversation because there doesn't seem to be anything that connects them with each other. However, there are some sets of statements where the statements are related in a particular way. And these sets of statements are called arguments, and they are the main subject of our course. So consider this set of statements. I think you can see that this set of statements is different from the other set. In the other set, there wasn't really any particular connection between the statements, but here you have a different situation. You have two statements here that taken together support the third statement. They give you a reason for believing the third statement. When you have a situation like this, when you have a set of statements such that one of them, normally the one that comes at the end, is offered as supported by the other two, then you have what is called an argument. So we're taking the word argument here in a very technical sense, in the sense of logic. Normally, an argument is understood as some kind of loud verbal disagreement or something along those lines. But an argument in logic is a different sort of thing. Again, it's a set of statements, one of which, this one in this case, is offered as supported by the others. Now, the statement that is supported by the other two statements in this case is called the conclusion. And the statements that serve as the starting point and support the conclusion are called the premises. Okay, so these are two important bits of terminology. These two The first two lines are the premises, and the statement that is supported by the premises, the statement that the premises are reasons for believing, is called the conclusion. So these are important bits of terminology that you need to remember that will be with us for the rest of the semester. So now we understand logic. Logic is the discipline that studies arguments. And ultimately the purpose of logic is to evaluate arguments. So what you want to do with logic is to be able to tell the good arguments from the bad ones. So logic doesn't simply look at arguments or catalog arguments, but the main purpose is practical. You want to see what pieces of reasoning are good and what pieces of reasoning are bad. And these terms are not very precise just yet, good and bad. We will introduce some terms that are more precise and do capture what we want to capture when we distinguish between different types of reasoning. Just a couple of additional things. When you're dealing with an argument, sometimes there are some words that are present in the argument that will tell you whether you're being given a premise or a conclusion. Look up here, for example, the word therefore in this first example of an argument that we looked at obviously introduces the conclusion. So there are some words that serve as conclusion indicators, words like therefore, thus, then, for this reason, etc. Any expression of this sort indicates that the speaker or writer is drawing a conclusion from the premises. There are also words that indicate that a premise is being supplied, words like since, because, or as, and similar words. So, for example, consider this argument. Okay, so as it's raining very hard and it's very cold, you should wear a coat. This is an argument because this statement, you should wear a coat, is given as supported by the other two. You're given two reasons for believing that you should wear a coat. There's probably also an implied premise or a set of implied premises that, for example, that when it's raining very hard and it's very cold, wearing a coat makes you more comfortable. This is something we all know. And so it's not supplied here explicitly, but it does play a role in the reasoning. Another implied premise is that you would rather be comfortable than uncomfortable. You would rather be warm than cold. That's another thing that goes without saying, and so it's not really explicitly stated, but it does seem to play a role in the argument. So notice here that the premise is introduced by as. The conclusion doesn't really have an indicator here, but it's certainly understood from the context that this is the conclusion. Okay, sometimes you don't see anything. There are no conclusion indicators and no premise indicators. For example, here's an argument. Okay, this is an argument, but there are no words like as, because, since, therefore. The context tells you that it is an argument. Those words sometimes serve as indicators, but they're not essential for the argument to be an argument. This is an argument because the statement waging war is always wrong is given as supported by the other two. These are two reasons war kills human beings, and it's always wrong to kill human beings. These are two reasons for believing that waging war is always wrong. If you accept these premises, then the conclusion follows from the premises or is supported by the premises. Notice also something interesting that in this argument the conclusion comes first, even if the word conclusion suggests the idea of something that comes at the end. As a matter of fact, here the conclusion is spoken first. When you put the argument in standard form, if you want to arrange the argument so that you can see its structure, then you will probably list the premises first and then list the conclusion. So if you wanted to put this in standard form, you would probably arrange it on numbered lines. So the first premise, the second premise, and the conclusion. Normally you want to set the conclusion apart by using the word therefore when you set the argument in standard form. So therefore, so this is another example of an argument. I hope this is clear. In section 1.1 of our textbook, essentially what we want to do is just look at arguments and parse arguments, that is, distinguish between the premises and the conclusion, and paying attention to premise and conclusion indicators and to the general structure and thrust of a passage will tell you whether a certain statement is a premise or a conclusion. I hope that this was clear, and I will talk to you in the next video.